I then started to, at a certain moment, do also other exhibitions for the museum, which are more kind of monographic shows. And this is something which I think maybe is also interesting to mention, because I think that the type of the monographic show, the retrospective, is a really problematic format, which I'm sort of interested in reinventing in dialogue with artists. So we, in the last 2 years, tried to develop a whole series of transdisciplinary retrospectives, where we start from this idea that if you really want to understand a practice of contemporary art or of visual art, it's very important to look at what happens in the other fields of knowledges. And so for each retrospective, we ask the artists who have been the people they always wanted to connect to, who are artists or philosophers or researchers they always wanted to meet. And so that can take all kinds of different forms. It can go very far. For example, in the case of the exhibition of Steve McQueen, he decided to produce a whole exhibition with the researchers of NASA. So the museum's role was to establish a contact to NASA, to get the researchers to Paris, to make access for Mr. McQueen to the archives of NASA, and to sort of set up that sort of structure which creates a new type of monographic show, which in a certain way applies to the monographic show a kind of a junction making, creating bridges also to other fields of knowledge, which earlier, I tried to elaborate more in group shows. You have, for example, in the case of Olafur Eliasson, the artist's desire to work with an urbanist, with Jonas Friedman, and have him do a big installation in his show as a sort of a collaboration. You have in the case of Ville de Paris, his desire to meet the man who has influenced since the early 80s, Jaron Lanier, the inventor of virtual reality. So the museum's role was to find Mr. Lanier, to bring him to Paris, to define his role together with Ville de Paris. So Jaron Lanier became the advisor somehow to the show. He wrote the program for Philippe. But it can also be, like in the case of Tacitadine, the desire to have actually a dialogue with Jean-Luc Nancy, which then leads to a text in the catalogue and leads also to a conversation within the exhibition. So each of that is up to the artists, you see, so we're not kind of this is kind of like the thing which I think is the red thread maybe in all my projects. This idea that it always starts with a conversation with the artist, and sort of is a lot based on that sort of principle of trying to not, have sort of curatorial ideas at the beginning, but sort of start to listen to what the artist really needs and what is urgent and what is necessary, and take it from there. So obviously the museum, in this sense, is one possibility, as Marcel Brotas always pointed out. The museum is one possibility which is surrounded by many, many other possibilities which are worth being explored. And I've always tried, in a certain way, to render, to take into account that sort of idea of Brotas and maybe make Marcel Brotas into a kind of daily practice. And so another, reflection on the museum, and I'm not sure if we probably can't go online, no, from here. No. But then maybe I will write you down later the websites. So I will put you the websites later at the end on this blackboard, and then we can, for those of you who are interested, you can check them out. One, type of museum which we started in the early 90s, which is somehow a parallel reality, is the Museum in Progress in Vienna. We started to think about, for a museum of the 21st century, that it could be really important, because many artists, told me that they would like to do an exhibition on an airplane, they would like to use all the billboards in a city, they would like to do an exhibition in the subway, very often in connection to a museum show, no? And it's very, very difficult to negotiate those spaces. So I think another, role of the curator, I've always seen is to sort of, help to open these spaces the artists need and, want, which are not necessarily open for contemporary art. And to my big surprise, that was the experience with Museum in Progress, there is actually a very great openness in most of the cases. To give you a concrete example, it starts with the great Italian artist Alighiero Boetti, one of the visionary artists of the 60s, who told me always, ever since I knew him, that his big unrealized project is to have an exhibition on all the airplanes of an airline, where like every morning the airline would carry a small puzzle into the world, and it would be a puzzle which would be really, really difficult to do, because it would be a sky. So it's a quite monochronous thing, and it takes hours and hours, so usually on a shorter flight you wouldn't get it done. And then little by little over the year there would be some airplanes in the sky, so it gets a little bit easier, but not really. And so it would be a sort of a series of puzzles which has the size of the small tables, of Austrian Airlines. Or Andreas Jominski always wanted to do a flying carpet on an airplane. So, Museum in Progress basically is there to facilitate such projects. So it's only a website, it's a small office in Vienna, and we basically invite artists to do projects with newspapers also, with television. It follows up on this idea that artists can produce clips for television, and that one, tries to open, according to necessity, those kind of spaces. Another project where this sort of idea of dematerialization of the exhibition, obviously in complementarity to very traditional museum shows, because this is not about an either-or scenario, because I don't think once television was invented, radio had to be reinvented. So I do not think that all these new type of exhibitions make the traditional museum show obsolete. On the contrary, I think there is still a very big necessity for that. And the collection remains the backbone of it all, and the museum as a time storage remains very, very valid. But still, as a sort of a complementary dimension to that, I think this idea of dematerialized exhibitions, such as they have been developed since the 60s at the wake of conceptual art, is a very interesting thing to further develop. So we do it, which you can find on the eFlux website, that also I'm going to write down later. We try to push that somehow to a limit. We basically try, together with Boltanski and Lavier, with two artists, to develop a do-it-yourself show, which is actually flexible, and where artists write recipes and instructions and how-to manuals and scores. It's a bit like in music, scores, and they can be interpreted in all kinds of different ways. So there's a museum version, there's an online version, and there's a kind of an archive of all these different different interpretations of the show. Another layer of exhibitions I'm working on are the exhibitions which happen in museums where you usually don't expect contemporary art. And that started also at the very beginning of the 90s. I spoke with Gerhard Richter, and he always went to Sils Maria, and we visited together the Nietzsche house, which some of you might know, and if you don't know it, it's really worthwhile a visit. It's a place where Nietzsche wrote Zarathustra, and it's a place of paraphernalia, books, of Nietzsche. And so we installed, Gerhard Richter really had this desire to basically show, because Nietzsche has been very important for the development of his work, and he had this desire to show these small sort of painted photographs he always did in Sils Maria in the context of the Nietzsche house. So, I rang the Nietzsche house, and we installed a small exhibition, very much in the interstices of this show, which was there for several months, and then some people visited the Nietzsche house and others visited the show of Gerhard Richter. And that gave a type of birth to a type of exhibition which has been explored ever since. So there was an exhibition of Boltanski in a monastery library, and more recently that has led to a series of house exhibitions. Because actually one of the things in relation to museums, and you have to tell me when, because I actually have no more time. I lost my watch and I can't have my cell phone switched on. So 10 more minutes. 10 more minutes, great. In a certain way that led to a series of house museum exhibitions. And I think something really interesting has happened in the last sort of 10-15 years, is that we have more and more started to sort of have also this homogenized phenomenon in relation to museum spaces. It's not only in relation to museum time, as I mentioned earlier, but it's also related to museum spaces. So more and more the museum collections and the museum spaces look the same all over the world. There are no more silent spaces left in museum, it's only noisy. And if you go to Tate Modern, you cannot find a single corner where it's not noisy. It's extremely impressive. You go there at 9 o'clock in the morning, which I once did, sort of early, and then at 10 the public arrives. And suddenly the silent condition becomes a noisy condition, and there is nothing in between. So, we have decidedly here a condition which is no longer oscillating between silent momentums and noisy momentums. The same thing about spaces, you have less and less this idea, like in all museums, we have very often this idea of small and big spaces. If you go, for example, to the Boymans in Rotterdam, you have tiny cabinets, and you have big monumental spaces, which creates a very different museum experience than if you have just a homogenized series of white cubes, which are all the same size. And that obviously, was even pushed further in the 80s, 90s by this obsession of extensions, of museums growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so, at a certain moment I thought it can be really important that we should say, small can be okay. And actually experiences in small museums are very, very different than experiences in big museums. So we started together with artists to do a whole series of exhibitions related to architectural sites of small museums.